solid as a brick. I looked at the man opposite me. He'd fallen silent. He held his empty glass a little higher and contemplated the lace of froth slowly descending the inside. The problem didn't take a lot of deep thought. "My shout, Doc," I said, and took his glass. I left mine half full on the table. It had been my shout for the past 5 rounds in the hour, and the pace was beginning to tell. Good value, though. The Doc, a bricklayer of somewhere over 50 summers and more winters, had a fine collection of first-person anecdotes and could tell them well. This particular yarn was gathering steam nicely. It was the building trade just after the war. Doc and his offsider, another hard case, were doing the fireplace and chimney jobs for a builder with a War Service Homes Commission contract. The homes were mostly about 10 squares, weatherboards with a cement tile roof. Fairly basic. The heating was an open fire in the lounge room. The problem was that the builder was a reluctant payer. Smoko talk had him as a bad risk. Back with a full glass, I said, "And you blokes got sucked in?" Doc nodded. He had got his nickname from a couple of whimsical habits. One was that he always referred to his favourite pub as the Clinic. If he was trapped into a discussion on the job with a builder or a client or inspector, around 4 o'clock he would always claim an appointment at the Clinic. Questioned further, he would throw in that his digestive system was giving trouble, or some other line depending on the gullibility of the interrogator. A second quirk was that it amused him to refer to his daily intake of alcohol as his medicine. The actual quantity was his own well-kept secret, but we suspected that it was significant. He had a heart starter or two with his breakfast. Some go faster with a meagre lunch, a large quantity of appetizer after work, and a generous nightcap following his evening meal. 2 things, though. Nobody ever saw the Doc more than a little sentimental, and nobody could recall him being late for work. So here we sat, as I tried to sort continuity and veracity into his yarn. It appeared that he and his mate were on £15 per house. For that money, they gave a labour-only job. All materials were provided by the builder. On the foundation poured by others, they built a chimney to 3 courses above the ridge, a firebox and hearth, with a tapestry bridge facade to the room. They generally got to eave level by knock-off time on the first day. On the second day, Doc's mate carried the flue and chimney through the roof, put a cap on it and wiped down the exposed brickwork. Then he dismantled their primitive scaffolding and loaded the old ute. In the meantime, Doc finished the fireplace itself, laid the hearth and pointed up the fire bricks and tapestries. Finished up about the same time, they were always gone by 4. Any spare cement left with them. In short supply, it was worth 2 bob a bag at the pub. A few bricks would leave too if there was a weekend job in the offing. The builder got a first-class job though. Doc knew his flues and draft. No mean skill, because every job would be varied to suit prevailing winds, roof design and local factors. Anybody who knew his work agreed with Doc. When he built a chimney, he would draw like a cow dung poultice. The 2 bricklayers were 4 payments behind at this point of the story. They had done 4 chimneys and the builder owed for each. The first and second had sort of slipped by. They were not short of funds and the builder claimed he'd not been paid out by War Service. The money was good and life was easy, so they hadn't wanted to rock the boat. The third job done and no payout started to worry them. With the 4th completed and still only excuses, they became alarmed. Smoko talk didn't improve their peace of mind. They knew the drill with War Service as well as anybody. Inspection on a finished job was prompt and script. Part settlement to the builder followed within a week. Full settlement usually at 30 days. Occupancy often predated full settlement. Not normal practice now, but builders went along with it then. Payment from the War Service Homes Commission was without risk, and occupancy meant that the house was secure against vandals or squatters. The problem for the brickies could be reduced to a nutshell. If the job was completed and 30 days have elapsed, then the builder had been paid out, but payment had not filtered down to them. This was not good business. Further, if the builder had found it difficult to meet the cost of one job, there might not be a lot of hope for the rest. He'd rung them about yet another house and dodged questions about payment. Doc thought they might go better face to face. They'd waited in ambush near the almost completed house, sitting in the ute with half a dozen coldies to dull the pub ache. He turned up to look over the latest job, and they confronted him. The ensuing conversation had been short and sharp, and by no means satisfactory to the brickies. Their proposal was that they were to be paid out on the 4 jobs owing and start the 5th one all square. The builder suggested that they do the next job, and promptly. Then he would consider what he owed them after the war service had paid him out. Alternatively, he would find another team to do the job, in which case, as far as the money owing was concerned, you can go to hell. The builder had stormed off, his final words flung over his shoulders. "Ring me when you make up your bloody mind. Only make it up tonight." After some delay, mostly spent in discussing the builder's family tree with each other and the deity, they checked the 4 houses. All were occupied. They were being played for mugs. Apparently, an almost sober and suitably humble Doc rang that night to say they would be only too pleased to attend to the work under discussion. I found this somewhat puzzling and not altogether in character. But listen, Doc, you had no guarantee that he'd do the right thing. You could have been giving him 5 jobs for free instead of 4. Weren't you taking a risk on that? He was bloody taking the risk inviting us back on the job. The way we looked at it, see, was this. He had a good hand, in fact a winning hand. What we needed was a shuffle and a new deal. With fresh cards, we could be back in the game. He was just a smart mug anyway. This time, they'd been diligent and inquiring. They had learnt that the prospective owners, a young digger and his wife, were even more desperate than usual. The wife was well advanced in pregnancy and desperately unhappy in their rented house, a dilapidated cottage in a poor neighbourhood. Her husband, with the backing of the local RSL branch, was going heavy on the appropriate authority, building and purchase approvals within war service. The builder had called for an inspection in 10 days, which was cutting things a bit fine. And subject to approval, the young couple would move in soon after. Doc and his mate did their usual excellent job, and a few days later the builder got his inspection. The War Service inspector was, as usual, slow and thorough, and passed the job. He approved a 40% advance, and with the help of relations and friends, the new owners moved in. It was difficult at this stage to see much joy in the proceedings for the bricklayers. It was the middle of a bitter Melbourne winter, Doc said, and the action was not long in starting. An infuriated digger rang the War Service inspector. He and his wife were huddled in a frozen phone box half a mile from their new home. They were being smoked out, he roared down the line, with his wife having a sob in the background. He did a sergeant major job on the public servant. He would get some prompt action or else. His next calls were going to be to the local member, the RSL, and Melbourne Truth. The inspector was not accustomed to being abused. He could hand out a powerful dressing down and believed fervently that's better to give than receive. The inspector was on the job at 8 the next morning. He was in a foul mood. An equally peevish returned soldier and spouse were crouched in front of the fireplace, staring at some smouldering firewood. Every window of their dream home was wide open. There was a lack of Christian charity in the cold, smoke-filled atmosphere. The inspector manoeuvred his spy stick, a small mirror mounted on 3 feet of dowling around the fireplace. Other than the obvious lack of fire and heat, he could find nothing wrong. With an unimproved outlook on life, he caught the builder just as he was leaving home. He gave him his view of the situation. Final payment on this job was stopped as of now. Any payments whatsoever owing on any other work now in hand were also stopped. The builder could forget about any future work for the War Service Homes Commission. This judgment would only be revised if the present situation at Lot So-and-so, Hull Road, Murrelbark, was rectified to his and the owner's complete satisfaction within 24 hours. He drove off, a self-satisfied glow enveloping his ample frame. The builder, somewhat unsettled, his ulcers glowing like coal, headed for the job. He too encountered a hostile reception. The digger was just leaving for work, so his wife took over the complaints department with enthusiasm. The fire out, the builder wriggled face up as far as he could into the fireplace. Rewarded by ash and soot in his hair and eyes, he found nothing amiss. There was only Doc's usual neat job of cove and flue, with a glimpse of grey sky up the zigzag brickwork. An inspection from the roof was equally frustrating. With a rather curt, "G'day, missus," he quit the job. That afternoon he went in search of a couple of bricklayers, his emotions under pretty uncertain control. Doc got him to shout 2 rounds before he even discussed the job. The builder had a somewhat revised proposition. Doc said, and put it to him, "You blokes fix the problem, and I'll settle up on the 4 jobs at the end of the week." I waited for more, but Doc had gone silent again. Back with a fresh glass, I remarked, "And that's how it was, I suppose." "Like hell." We told him we wanted to be fixed up on the job. Doc grinned happily. He didn't really like that. When he settled down a bit, my mate told him it'd have to be for 5 jobs, and that set him off again. He said he hadn't been paid out himself. I told him to take it out on the 40% we knew he'd already got. He was getting red in the face, so I tried to give him some advice on blood pressure and that, but he wouldn't listen. I could picture the 2 hard cases enjoying every minute of it. Doc was still relishing the incident 20 years on. Then we hit him with a double whammy. What was that? I told him that it had to be in cash, and my offsider said there'd be another $5 for fixing the job. That was 80 quid all up. Christ! I thought he was going to blow a gasket. He was just about bloody choked. We touched him for a couple of beers by dithering about when we could find the job to look at it. The doc chuckled maliciously. We finally agreed to 8 the next morning. Geez, he would have kicked the dog when he got home. I bet his old woman copped it. Your name? Well, your name wouldn't have been too good with this bloke, Doc. We'd nothing to lose. We weren't going to work for the mongrel again anyway. There was plenty on in those days. How'd you go the next morning? Oh, good-o. I told him to bring a ladder, about 100 bricks, a quarter yard of sand, and a couple of bags of cement. What was all that for? Just to keep him amused. We only wanted the ladder and the brick. He tried to hold the money till we fixed the job, but we started to get back in the ute. So he gave up. To make matters worse, the young bloke had taken the day off and was standing around with his wife. When he gave us the money, I told him to put the ladder against the chimney. He asked about the material, so we told him to take it home again. My mate was a big fella, but dinkum, I thought the mongrel was going to take us both on. The yarn must be nearly finished, I thought, but couldn't see the twist. I made another pilgrimage to the bar and returned. "Well," I said. Doc started to speak and then giggled. The giggle grew and grew. With shoulders shaking and eyes watering, he took a full minute to quieten enough to swallow. Half the contents of his glass steadied him a little. I went up the ladder and dropped the brick down the flue. There was a bit of crash. "She's fixed," I told him, and the mate and I got out smartly. We decided to have the day off anyway and go fishing. "But the chimney," I said. "How did you fix it?" "With the brick," the doc winked. "It was special for non-paying builders. We'd built a sheet of glass in, see, halfway up the flue. It couldn't have drawn with a cow dung poultice." Served the bastard right.